Hi, thanks for tuning in to the Headless Marketing Show. I'm your host, Alex Belding. Today, we're talking all about the front end and why it is so important for marketing to be really focused on the customer. What is the value the customer is receiving from engaging with your content, from engaging with your front end, and how marketing teams, marketing departments, marketers in general can get a lot more out of their digital experiences and their customer experiences by really focusing on the customer. We're going to be talking with Michael C. Lamb. He is the president and co-founder of Native Message. Native Message is focused on bringing app-like functionality into the text messaging experience through the RCS, or the Rich Communication Services Protocol, really making messages less like the outdated texting experience and more conversational and what customers are looking for. That's why our conversation today about the front end. Michael has great insights and ideas on what companies and marketers can do to really focus on their front end, give customers the experiences they're looking for, and ultimately change the game and change the mindset and be better at being customer focused. So without further ado, let's bring Michael in to the show.
Hey, Michael, welcome to the show.
Very glad to be here, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to spend some time with you today.
Absolutely. Well, I've been interested in talking about you, particularly because, you really focus on the customer experience and the entire front end for folks, specifically with chatbots and messengers and RCS feeds. And we can get into all that in a second. But to you, what is the front end, and why do so many folks kind of miss it?
So the front end to me is the consumer touch points. And those consumer touch points are either controlled by the company or they are in third-party platforms. So owned properties, their website, third-party, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok, whatever else comes along, all of those things. So when you are creating these experiences for these consumers to begin to interact with your brand, a lot of the time, it's not really focused on the consumer. So when I think about the front end, I think about company journeys, not customer journeys. And what has the company put in place in front of the consumer to be able to get their attention, to be able to get them to move down the funnel, all of these different things. The reality is what they're doing is they're trying to capture information for themselves. And if you think about a quiz on a website, right? What is that really for? That's for me to figure out what I want, but it's ultimately for them to understand who I am.
Yeah, zero party data, right?
And you get into zero party and first party, and then you get into capturing email addresses, and specifically in the e-commerce world. But really, in general, most of the time, the front end is, customer touch points, what they touch, the ones that companies can control. We'll talk more about that. The ones they can't control, you're creating the best experience you possibly can using the tools you can inside of a Facebook or whatever it might be. And ultimately, everything else is irrelevant to the consumer. Right. They don't care. They don't care what database you use. They don't care what shopping cart you use. They don't care about any of it. What they care about is finding what they want. And a lot of the times with these front ends, it's very difficult to get what you want. Ultimately, everybody's trying to accomplish a goal, purchase a product, generate a lead, whatever that may be. But there's all these steps in the way. And all of those steps really aren't for the customer, they're for the company.
Right.
And that's where I think front ends fail miserably. And you can, please jump in here and your front end, back end experience. But like we talked about before, most companies don't focus on the front end when looking for new technology. They focus on the back end.
They approach stuff from the back end, and then they wonder why, hey, we just made all these decisions. We rebuilt and redeployed and then we go live and our KPIs don't change, right? We're still barely getting conversion. We're barely getting interest. And it's because the front end is an afterthought, right? I like the way you put it. The company journey instead of the customer journey is how most people are making, profound decisions about their front ends instead of what's the front end? What is the customer experience? Like, how do we give the customer what they want? And then we get the attention, we get the conversion, we get the sale.
You get
and
all
holy
of it.
Smokes, right? You get the whole pie, and we don't have to go play the game of how do we get 100,000 emails that are of low quality so that we can send out 10 million emails and get 0.2% of them to turn into customers, right? Like, but this is the way we do it. It's so bizarre. Yeah.
Right. And the world is mobile, right? Everybody's going to agree on that.
Yes.
That hands down, no doubt about it. Even though 50% of traffic desktop, 50, like all that, we're on our phones. Really, that's where everybody's spending most of their time. How many people are developing their front end using a phone interface?
Right.
Very few people. Most
few.
people are developing a front end using a desktop interface. And they are then making sure that it looks nice on a mobile device, responsive, so that it can screens and this. Totally get it. Totally understand it. That's not the world we live in anymore. The world we live in is mobile. And if you are not creating experiences that are designed from a mobile perspective first, then they're not going to work.
Right.
Who wants to scroll up? Like, here's a great example, right? QR codes, hugely popular, pandemic, all of that. Everybody knows that. So now they're on print advertisements. And I see them all the time. I scan them all the time. For like furniture or clothing or whatever. You've seen them all over the place, right? How many times have you scanned one of those QR codes and been taken right to the product that's on that ad?
Right. Like
you're not. You're taken to a page that somehow converted well in some other world of whatever it was they were doing. And now I have to go look for it. And now I have to find it. Instead of, if you have a print ad and there's two products, make a page with those two products on it.
Right.
I'm sure there are people out there that get this and are doing this and know this, but I very, very rarely see it. And it just always, it makes me so confused, because I think the reality is the company never goes through the journey. They rely on who the other people are, the agencies, or whoever it is, to create these experiences based upon the brief or based upon what they're trying to accomplish, whatever it might be. But then does the CMO ever actually scan the QR code on the ad to see what the experience is like? I don't think so, because if they did, it would be a better experience. Right.
Well, or on the flip side, right, it goes to the product page, but your flyer was particular to your customer type, your vertical or whatnot, and you get to that product page and it's back to just generic. It's, instead of creating a page for the QR code, they just slip the QR code onto, because that's easier, right? Again, hey, we have this QR code technology, but do we create new pages and create a full experience? Or do we just slap this onto what we've already got and we can publish it in 5 days, as opposed to taking the extra 7 days to make it a full holistic experience, right?
Right. Because like we talked about before, ultimately it's about achieving that goal. And you're doing all of these things to try to achieve that goal. And even in that example, right, you go and you scan that QR code, you should literally just go to a product page with a buy now button on it. And like some description, some anything, whatever it might be. But again, it's about making it easier for me to buy from you, because ultimately that's what you want. Make it easier for me to give you my information so that you can tell me more about what you do, because that's what you want.
Right.
All of these other things are all of these measurement tools. And again, I get it, that are used internally in meetings. I'm doing my job. I'm doing well. We're doing well. We're doing this. The big problem with all of it is that none of it works very well.
Yeah. Poor work rate. Yeah.
But because it doesn't work very well for everybody,
it's okay.
Everybody accepts it because nobody will tell you that they're like another company or another brand. They don't want to be. They want to be very different. They want to be very unique. But at the end of the day, they're comparing themselves against everybody else. So in reality, they're not. They're the people that they're comparing themselves to.
Right.
Instead of focusing on what's important to them, what are we really focused on? And hey, this stuff isn't really working. How do we do it better? What are the other tools that are out there versus just going, well, the 10 other companies in our space, this is their benchmark and we're there. So I'm doing a good job and I'm going to keep my job. And again, totally get it. To me, it makes no sense.
Right. And earlier we were talking about, just to kind of maybe pivot this to a different mentality of thinking about this. You were mentioning basically focusing on, instead of KPIs on, emails collected or click or impressions, right? Focusing your KPIs on attention and like how that can really, maybe it's a bridge too far to ask marketing teams to like be front end first and customer centric, because those are buzzwords that are maybe harder to they're too nebulous, right? Maybe.
Yep.
Whereas like, hey, we need numbers. The CFO doesn't care about customer centric. They care about numbers.
Right.
But maybe like, actual, the nanoseconds eyeballs are engaged in our content, maybe that's a KPI that allows us to become front end oriented, because that's where the consumer is, right? They're paying attention to our landing pages, our advertisements, our blog posts, our, whatever channel we're publishing in, whatever front end we're talking about. How have you kind of heard that discussed and or approached as you're kind of, being an evangelist of being more front end focused?
Let me pull up I was actually watching a webinar, and one of the products that we offer is an emerging channel called RCS. RCS stands for Rich Communication Services, and it is, in a very kind of simple manner, it's the ability to put a automation, an app, a chat bot, whatever you want to call it, inside of the text messaging app on a phone. So instead of just basic text or text in an image, now you have an entire customer journey. Right. So this event was around RCS and how it's growing and expanding and so on and so forth. And one of the things that came up, and it was actually from an agency PhD, and the guy was talking about attention. And, you hear Eddie read about it, all this, but he really kind of defined it in a way that made a ton of sense, where, he said a TV ad has 7.2 seconds of attention, right? A Facebook ad has 2 seconds of attention. A banner ad has 0.1 seconds of attention. But RCS, because of its immersive, engaging framework, has 20 seconds of attention. So when you really start to think about where are people spending time, how are they spending their time, and how do I get more of their attention, I believe that it's going to start to move into these different channels where they are inherently and built to be more engaging and to drive these attention-based seconds, as they're called, or attention metrics.
Right. Well, and that's kind of, in one aspect, that's kind of the concept of omni-channel publishing, or having like a clear user experience across all your channels. and getting people into channels that have high engagement rates, like text messages, right? Because
Exactly.
if you're like me, you get a text message, you read it, And then if you're like me, you're also annoyed that you sign up for all of these retailers, coupons, right? And then they blow text messages at you, and then you respond with questions and nothing happens, right? It's a one-way pipe of look at my crap, look at my crap, look at my crap. And then I engage and there's nothing there for me, right? Like the user experience isn't there. I can't talk back and they don't listen. Yeah.
That text message is just a notification sent to you to let you know that that company wants you to pay attention to them.
Right. And then when I do, and I respond back, hey man, I got a question, no response, right?
And that's the piece, right? I mean, that's a whole nother discussion for another day around the entire evolution of messaging. So I've been in the text messaging space for almost 20 years. So started the first text messaging company in 2003. And the evolution has been build a database, send the same message. Then it was personalized, put the name in the message, and then it goes out to everybody. Then it was what I call utilitarian use cases, flight alerts, sports scores, appointment reminders, right? We all love those because there's value there. To your point about the retailer doesn't understand the channel, and it doesn't understand the value that they're providing if they're not delivering the right message and the right content. And then it really got to this whole two-way personalized kind of messaging, which is where we are now. Some people have embraced it and are doing a great job with it, and others have no idea what to do with it. And most text messaging companies that are out there are not really set up as conversational tools. They're meant as one-way notification alert tools. And they're very restrictive from that standpoint. So there's not a lot of different use cases that you can explore. And that is one of the things that we've done with the new company, Native Message, is really created a platform that's very open, that allows you to, use a lot of different use cases. But more importantly, you can have conversations with people. It's two-way. You can send emojis, you can send images, they can send you images, right? Like imagine you're on a support call and the guy goes, hey, can you text me a picture to this number of what you're talking about? And you go click, click, boom. And he's like, oh, I see. No, it goes in there. And you're like, oh, great. Bye.
Right.
Like it's bringing together all of these different technologies in a new way that makes it easier for consumers to interact with brands. And that's really what we've done with Native Message, is we just make all these channels more effective.
Well, and you allow brands to create experience, right? Because at the end of the day, if you keep the main thing, it's engage with your customers the way they want to be engaged with. And we were talking earlier, along the lines of like companies making decisions that they value as opposed to that their customers value. What do you think is a way to help people kind of change their minds about this, or at least approach the front end in a meaningful way? We talked maybe about like, is it focusing on attention? One of the things that we've done in our sales cycle is we stopped measuring email collections and demo calls, and we just started measuring, did we have a good conversation with the prospect, right? Because that's all that matters. Like if one of our sales guys has a good conversation, then there's actual opportunity there, as opposed to, somebody signed up for our newsletter or downloaded an ebook or whatever, right? Like there's no engagement, there's no conversation. And the front end on a website, in social media, in text message, is about fostering those conversations, or at least giving the user what they're looking for. Outside of thinking that way, like what can marketers do? What can companies do that helps them, get more focused on the front end and kind of get out of this, being stuck operating things from the back end? What are some other What are some other ways that
I
people
think
can
that
approach this?
I honestly, I think it's as simple as those people looking at how they use these tools and these devices in their personal lives and the
Yeah.
issues they run into and the struggles that they have and the experiences that they like and that they think are good and are straightforward and are simple. So, you know, we brought up conversations. The ultimate form of engagement is a conversation.
Right.
Our brain, if we're not face to face with someone, or like I'm talking to you right now, and it's in a digital channel or a digital surface, I don't know if that's a person or if it's an automated tool, right? I don't like the term chatbot. I wish there was another term. I like automation. That's really where all of this is going. All of these digital channels are going to enable all of these different predefined options. You call it whatever you want, but that's where all of this is going. And one of the biggest problems that's happening right now that I see is in the world of chatbots, you have two different components. You have the interface and you have the brain.
Right.
The interface is where all the power is, which is what we're talking about. We all know how to navigate the interface. But when it comes to your point about asking a question or starting to interact or starting to go further than the surface level, that's where most of it fails. And most of it fails not because of the interface, it's because of the brain. And it's because of the expectations that are set and all of that. So the way, again, that we look at it is stop trying to be everything to everybody. Stop trying to create this tool that has this brain that knows everything. Like, for example, IBM Watson, right? We could all say that that's the biggest brain, the oldest brain that's out there that exists and all of that. Encyclopedia Britannica. Right.
Yep, exactly.
Everything, right? Like all of it. Plays chess, Jeopardy, everything. It still doesn't know what a 10 milliliter sphygmometer is with a pipette, curly, whatever. I don't even know if it's a real thing, but you get my point. It still doesn't know everything.
Right.
So instead of trying to do that, focus on the journey, focus on getting the customer through the funnel, focus on getting the customer where they want to be, and then help them there. But trying to pull it all together inside of this one tool, it's just a massive undertaking. And that's why, quite honestly, most of them, the attention isn't put into it. The time isn't put in, again, off on a little tangent here, but it's really, it's about understanding how you are using these tools in your personal life and what are your frustrations and what do you like? And then taking that and then bringing that into your organization and saying, hey, this sucks.
Right.
Like, have you guys seen this? This is really cool. Every e-commerce company is competing with Amazon, whether you want to admit it or not.
Right. To a degree. Yeah.
What are you going to do? What are you going to do to make your experience easier than me going to a website, hitting a button, and my package shows up 2 days later? Now, does everybody need 2-day shipping? No. But is the experience clean, simple, straightforward? Are they asking me for my email address? Do I have to spin a wheel when I go on Amazon? Right? None of that's there.
Right.
And it's not there because it creates friction. And they know that.
Right. Well, and to your point, your experiences should be tailor fit to your customer, right? And I feel like that's where the internet kind of sits right now, is that everybody is trying to be all everything to everyone all the time, instead of, hey, what does our customer look like? What do they want? What are they struggling with? What do they care about? Let's build an experience that really fits them like a high-end suit. And man, they will slide in and enjoy it, right? They will be on. We don't have to communicate to the entire market. We have to communicate to our market segment, and we have to make experiences that fit our market segment. And I feel like that's where, again, when you lead from the back end and you how do we incorporate Watson into our stack? Or how do we, we have to be on Shopify because, the checkout is, so easy to integrate with our shipping provider, right? And we have to be on WordPress because, it has 3 plugins that are paramount to our email automation, right? And we make decisions, again, that only matter to us in our internal operations. They have nothing to do with our customer.
Right.
And then we wonder why we are operating at a 0.6 conversion rate, right? Like, why does nobody care about all of our back-end technology, right? Like, oh, that's surprising,
So I think that, it's one, right? It's two-way. It is not only our customer and understanding who they are and getting that information from them so that we can better understand them. But if, as a company or a brand, you don't understand the value you provide and why someone does business with you, then you can't put that out in the world. And I'll give you an example, text messaging example. We have a client that is in the agriculture space, right? Farmers. They came to us years and years and years ago. And the guy's like, hey, I want to send a bunch of text messages to farmers. And I kind of laughed, my ignorance, right? Why would farmers want text messages? They don't, right? I had no idea. Incredibly technology savvy, very in tune with everything that's going on. The tractors almost drive themselves these days, all this kind of stuff, right? So these guys wanted to start sending text messages to all these farmers. And we're like, all right, no problem. And eventually it got to a point where, they have a list of 100,000 people and they are pushing content to these people every day, sometimes 4 or 5 times a day. Now imagine that, right? You've got a brand that is sending you 5 messages before 2 o'clock every day with all of this. And you're just like, why are you They understand the value that they provide to the customer and they deliver that value through those messages. And that is why that list has almost a 0 unsubscribe rate.
Right.
Because you would think if you're bombarding, terrible word to use because they're really not, but bombarding someone with all of that content, they're going to run.
Right.
But they don't.
It feels like spam if it's not tailored and thought through and useful. Right. Yeah.
What is the value? What is the value I provide? Why is the reason someone does business with me? And how do I deliver that through these channels so that that comes across and it resonates with the people that want the value that I provide? And that's the other piece of it. You can go and you figure out personas and I want a high intent and this and money and kids and cars and zip codes and all the other things all over the place. But if those people don't understand, they're never going to do business with you. And that's, I think, something that, and I don't have the answer for that, how that works across every industry, every vertical, B2B, B2C, B2B to B2C, to whatever. But as a company, it's part of your mission. It's part of your values. It's part of who you are and what you are. And you can look at tons of different companies that do stuff like that, right? All day long. And people embrace those brands. I'm not just buying a pair of shoes. I'm buying a pair of shoes and 2 other pairs are going to go to somebody that doesn't have shoes. I'm not just buying a pair of glasses. I'm not, right? And that's obviously, again, a whole nother topic for another conversation, but all of that stuff is very, very big right now.
Well, and to your point, right? I mean, if you have a laser focus and you can think about your customer first, what do they care about? What matters to them? Then you focus on your messaging. You're not thinking about how do I seamlessly integrate this with my CRM. You're not thinking about, all of those kinds of questions and problems can be solved later, right? If you deliver a front end experience that is tailor fit to your org and to your customer and to the value chain that you produce and to the things that they're looking for. To your point that we were talking previously, you get the sale. You don't have to send them a survey. You don't have to ask them 19 times for an email address. You don't have to give them the Trojan horse ebook that they, give you their email address and then you are in their inbox with unrequested marketing, right? You get the sale, you get the conversation, you get the relationship, as opposed to you get some number in a spreadsheet for KPI purposes to tell the CFO that, hey, we got another 10,000 emails this month and it hasn't affected revenue at all.
Well, I really believe it's just going to get to a point where it's like, we spent this much money this month and we made this much money.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing else matters.
Bingo.
Why does any of that other stuff matter?
Yeah.
What are you going to do with it? Where does it go? What do you get? Like, you can't do anything with it. It's there so that you can create reports and you can justify the money that, again, I completely understand all of it. It doesn't make sense to me, because ultimately you are stopping people from doing business with you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what you're trying to do. That's what every company's trying to do. Like, just make it easy for me to do business with you. Then I become a loyal fan. Then I start to tell everybody, like, it's all the same stuff, but everyone lives in this world of funnels. Top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel. This is the content here, and then we need to hit them there, and then we need to hit them there. And look, just get them from the top to the bottom in 10 seconds. Why? Again, I'm making it sound very simple, and obviously there's a lot more to it than that. But I believe that's where all of this starts going. That's where all of this starts moving. It's all about conversations. It's not about form fills, not about landing pages, not about radio buttons, check boxes, email fills, quizzes. Like, all of these things are out there because you think it's going to help you sell more.
Right. Well, and they can help you sell more if you have the relationship, right? Like, if I know your brand, I care about it deeply, now I'm willing to go through an actual survey. And then you can make that survey much more valuable than trying to do cold surveys to customers that hardly know you. Every tool has a place in the toolbox, right? You just have to curate that toolbox. Again, it's back around what's the customer experience, instead of approaching it from the back end, which is, how do I get more emails into my CRM so that I can send more automated follow-ups and I can, blast higher volumes, instead of how do I curate this down to really good experience that is targeted and valuable. And as we kind of are wrapping up our conversation, like, the way that you kind of are approaching and delivering value to your customer base with RCS and kind of that more conversational marketing right in the text message app where the customer is, what are other places that you are seeing, the users, customers out there begging and pleading for better experiences that marketing is still really struggling to deliver? Do you have any anecdotes from your personal life? Do you see this from your own customers that maybe do some things that are really clever? What have you noticed that helps?
It gets back to that conversation we had about the QR code and about, like, that's the first place I think most people should start. And clearly a lot of it's not happening, but like, you have to go through the journey that's created for the customer as a customer. Don't do it as the marketing person and view it from the lens of, does this do for my job what I need it to do? Bingo. Look at it from the lens of, I'm a consumer, and is this a good experience?
Right. Am I enjoying this? Right. Is it answering my questions?
Right. Exactly. So then I think, again, it's about, you mentioned RCS with the conversations, and, it really gets into how can you integrate those conversations into other places? How can you integrate these very quick little interactions? Not the bottom right corner chat bot you're trying to get help with or whatever. It's more of like a little micro moment where you're in this kind of conversational interface, getting this user to go from the top of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So one of those other areas is in display ads. So now you can actually take, and we have developed the ability to take this conversational experience and place it into a display ad. So now instead of clicking on an ad and then going to a landing page and then form fields, radio buttons, checkboxes, all of that kind of stuff.
You figure it out, Mr. Customer, right? Yeah.
I can now interact inside of the ad. And the value there is multiple levels. The first one is it's unique and different. Nobody's seen it before, so it's going to get someone's attention.
Has some novelty, right?
Has some novelty to it. Exactly. The second one is typically when you are buying ads, you're buying based upon an impression and you're all about click-through rates. And that's really where your world lives. But what if you could take that same dollar, or that same dollar cost you $1.25, but now because you have this conversational experience in this ad, you're getting zero-party data in a place where you were never able to get it before. So now you're taking that dollar or that $1.25 and you're getting more value out of it. You're pulling more from it because you're using tools and you're using solutions that deliver more value. And all of this stuff exists today. It's ready to go. It's here, and it's about someone goes into, Facebook and goes to your Facebook Messenger. What's that experience like? Is that experience designed to get somebody to do something with you? Or is it, half baked because whatever, right? You think about all these different landing pages, all these landing pages that everybody creates. And again, top of funnel, middle, they're all designed and the buttons are yellow and red and green and the words are big and the whole tons of time and energy spent on it. What if they were taken to a conversation instead? What if that, when they clicked on whatever it was, opened up a conversation on their mobile device? And now it said like, hey, thanks for stopping by. We'd like to tell you more about this, that. What are you interested in? That. Oh, great. Hey, where do you live? Or how many cars do you have? How many dogs? How many, whatever it is. Every time somebody touches it, you're creating engagement, you're driving attention, you're increasing conversions, but you're also capturing zero and first party data in a way that the end user doesn't mind.
Right. Well, it's valuable
because you're providing the value.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Versus you sending somebody to a landing page that has a bunch of questions. How many dogs do you have? How many cars do you have? How many this do you have? Right. You're going to do two or three. There's 10. You're going to do 2 or 3 and you're out. But if you put it in a different format and you present it in a different way, you can get them to give you all 10 very easily. So it's really about understanding how to take these conversational interfaces, chatbots, automation, whatever you want to call it, and put it in places where it hasn't existed before, and then begin to just pull all of that data that you're getting to better understand your customers, to then go back out and create the experiences that are much better and are much more focused on the consumer. Because you need them to tell you. Right?
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to get consumers to tell you anything. Ask anybody about surveys. No one fills them out.
Right. Yeah.
Right? It just doesn't happen. So what's another way?
You can get a free Chick-fil-A sandwich, and I've never done it. I've never done it. Exactly.
Scan the QR code on the receipt, you win $500. Why don't they put the name and the picture of the person who won the $500 last time so you know it? Anyway, it's my.
Well, and to your point, right? It's what we talk about on Weber. It's audience-specific content as opposed to, trying to be all the time for everybody. Segment, make experiences that are catered, that are tailored. And, and then you don't have to put the world on them. You just have to put the few people that actually will care about that content, right? And to your analogy with the farmers, that can be a large pool of people, 100,000 people. It's not like this is, 10 people sometimes. And if it's good, relevant, and valuable, 0%,
right. They're not unsubscribing.
Churn. They're not leaving.
They're not
leaving. It's a house they want to hang out in. It's the same thing. My favorite bar, man. I will go there every Thursday. They've got me. I'm there,
So the one thing I would add is when we talk about like segmenting, curating, understanding audiences, building these experiences, all of those things, right? That's a lot of work. That's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But what you can do is you can create an experience like what we're talking about, these conversational experiences that give the end user the feeling that that's happening.
Right.
Because they're able to make a choice. They're able to personalize the experience based upon the choices that they make. So you can, in effect, it's not be everything to everyone,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't have to create 100 of these for it to be effective. You need to create 3.
Right.
And inside of those 3 are all of the different things that you want the consumer or the end user to interact with, because ultimately, as the company or the brand, you are defining where they start and where they end. What happens in the middle makes them feel like it's personalized and it's good and it's nice and wow, look at this great experience. But ultimately, you control where they end up.
Right.
And that's another piece of it is you're presenting the consumer with something that feels like they're in control when actually you're in control.
True. And at the same token, though, if you're using, like, for example, if you're using WordPress or some landing page builder that only manages content as pages, yeah, it's a boat ton of work to create audience specific content. But if you're using a more modern stack with a headless CMS and, all that soapbox,
Yep.
Now your content is data, and you don't, all of your major pillars and much of the actual, all of that actual work is repeatable, scalable, and you only have to personalize, like you're saying, sections and small moments,
right,
which is much easier to do when your content is managed via API than if you're stuck in a database and having to build umpteen pages. That's a whole nother podcast. But
that's the thing. I mean, it's, you're moving from a static world to a dynamic world.
Mm-hmm.
And in the process, the dynamic piece is scary because when it's static, what's there.
Yeah.
It doesn't change. It's fixed. It's all right. We have control over this. When it's dynamic, it's a little more out in the wild. Like, what's somebody going to do here? Does this make sense? Like, is this the right way to do this? Or do we just push this thing right in front of them that, like, we hope resonates, versus allowing them to go through something that ultimately at the end of the day gets what you want as the company or the brand, but as a consumer makes me feel like I had a good experience. Like I feel good about it after the fact. Pleasant is the word I always use.
Right.
Right. Like it's one of those things where you're just kind of like, but also like, what if you did it and you didn't even know you were doing it and it just kind of happened?
Right.
And you were like, wow, how did I get here?
That was sweet. Man,
that
this
was
guy
crazy.
Gets me. Right.
This is really, holy cow, this is really cool. That I think is ultimately where all of this goes. Everything is going to move into conversations. Everything is, the web is going to, it's going to dramatically change. All the Web3 stuff, love it. The front end is going to basically mature along with that to a point where attention becomes the most important thing.
Right. That's the currency. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, Michael, this was a great conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Really appreciate having you on.
It's my pleasure. And I enjoyed it as well. And always like talking about all of this marketing and technology and what's out there in the world. And the reality is that, there is a ton of stuff out there that exists that can help people along the way. And it's just a matter of being an early adopter or being open
and
to
keeping your focus on the customer, right? Keeping your focus on the customer experience, and then you're
that's going to drive what tools you use. And that's all happening right now. And especially with cookies going away.
Yeah.
It's going to accelerate it like we haven't seen. And
right. Because you've been able to kind of get away with it because, hey, I can follow this person around the internet for the next 30 days and can't necessarily do that anymore. So.
No. And now it's really going to be about these, one-to-one personalized. It's just been like, to your point, it's been ad tech and martech companies have made it very easy for people to spend money with them to accomplish a goal. And those typically don't work well. But if you do something that's a little harder and takes a little more time and a little more effort and a little more energy with a focus on the consumer or the customer, I think that's where you win.
Exactly. Well, we'll leave it there. Focusing on the customer, that's where you win. That's perfect.
Absolutely. Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Mike.
My pleasure.